After last week's video, I wanted to do something a little more light-hearted. I thought, wouldn't it be funny if I translated the names of Thomas characters into a bunch of different languages, then back to English, and then draw the results? I started with English, obviously, then translated to Arabic, French, Norwegian, Japanese, Welsh, Finnish, Mandarin, Czech, Romanian, Cantonese, Portuguese, Hungarian, Danish, Irish, Italian, Thai, Swedish, Scots Gaelic, Hebrew, Spanish, Hindi, and finally back to English. I use Google Translate and a couple of other translation sites here and there because Google likes to throw a fit when you want to translate Thai into Swedish. So, after translating Thomas the Tank Engine into over 20 languages, the result was... oh, it barely changed. But I'm not defeated yet. I have another trick up my sleeve, and with that, we can begin. So what I've decided to do instead is translate the characters' official bios rather than their names. I've gone with the character bios from the 1990s as seen on the back of the Earthel packaging as well as the official website of the era. This is Thomas's bio. Thomas can be described as a cheeky, fussy little engine. He often gets into scrapes, usually by being overeager to do things best left to bigger and more sensible engines. But clouds never last long in Thomas's life, and he's soon bustling about again, playing his part in the yard and on his very own branch line, of which he is extremely proud. After being translated over 20 times, it changed to this. Thomas is a brave, even though a bit bitter, young engineer who often gets into trouble. Most people are busy, so there's no time for large and more efficient machines. But among Thomas's life for so long, between black smoke clouds, he returns to work with quick and complete energy and starts working in the shipyard and assembly line, a work that he is very proud of. Well, that translation certainly was funny peculiar. You can make up your own mind as to whether it was funny ha-ha as well. So apparently, as well as being an engine, Thomas is also an engineer. This could mean engineer as in the American term for a train driver, but could also mean someone who designs, builds and maintains machines. I figure that since we've now learnt that Thomas works at a shipyard, we can have him put his engineering skills to good use and help build some ships. The ships in question are relatively small, since there is no time for large and more efficient machines as we have just learned. I've added some black smoky clouds to the background, as was mentioned in the translated description. It's interesting because although the translated bio is rather nonsensical, you can kind of see where all the weird quirks originated from, almost like a game of telephone. Engine became engineer, the bigger and more sensible engines became the large and efficient machines, the shunting yard became a shipyard, and Thomas's branch line became an assembly line. You just had to change a few words here and there for the meaning to completely change. Since Thomas is now an engineer, I've decided to give him a hard hat. I could have probably put the hat directly above his face, which would have made a bit more sense, but instead I decided to have the hat going over his funnel, kinda like the Santa hats that the engines sometimes wear during the Christmas episodes. I've given Thomas his cross-faced to show that he is a bit bitter despite being brave. I've got Thomas holding a welding machine to help him build the ship. Well, I say holding, it's just kind of draped over his buffer. I could have given him buffer hands, but in the end I decided to keep the characters themselves largely the same as they normally are, just with everything around them being weird. Most of this scene uses cool colours such as the lilac sky, the blue cranes, the off-white, slightly blue ships, and Thomas himself for that matter. I've decided to have the light from the welding machine give off a warmer yellowish hue to contrast with this. I think it works rather well. And with that said and done, here is the completed image. Here's Percy's official description from back in the day. Percy is the junior member of the principal team of engines. He is a happy little chap who is normally quite happy puffing around the yard with no particular desire for adventure in the great world outside. He is always keen to oblige, a fact of which the other engines are apt to take advantage, and just occasionally his respect and admiration for Sir Topham Hatt borders on outright servility. And here is that same description after being translated a bunch of times. Percy is the youngest member of the motorcycle team. He is a happy boy who is fond of horticulture and always spends a good time outside. He loves to take care of other technicians riding a bike. Sometimes his praise and respect for the main bike disappears. So that's a new word I've learnt. Horticulture. Horticulture is the art and study of growing flowers, trees, shrubs, fruit, vegetables and ornamental plants. So it made sense to have the scene take place in a botanical garden. But it's got to be an outdoor garden because Percy, or should that be Percy, spends a good time outside. I made sure to add a lot of different types of plant, not only trees and shrubs, but also some flowers and apples. I'm sure a horticulturist like our good friend Percy would really enjoy a place like this. It really would make him a happy boy. There's a bit of syntax ambiguity with the line, "He loves to take care of other technicians riding a bike." Does that mean that Percy likes to take care of the technicians who are riding a bike? Or does it mean that Percy likes to take care of technicians whilst he himself is riding a bike? Well, I figured that since Percy is a member of the motorcycle team, it would make sense for him to have a bike of his own. Plus, the idea of a locomotive riding a bike is just kind of funny. I decided to give him a chopper, which is quite different from the flopper chopper that he's usually paired with. I'll admit that I don't have a lot of experience drawing bikes, and this one proved to be quite the challenge. I think it's a bit of a cliche that artists struggle a bit when drawing bikes. Bikes and horses seem to be the sticking points for a lot of artists. Going back to the original untranslated character bio, it's interesting that Percy's description seems to primarily line up with how he was written in Trouble in the Shed, his first appearance. That might serve as an indication of when these character bios were originally written. It seems a little strange in hindsight that Percy's cheekiness isn't mentioned, and that he has no interest in leaving the station yard, despite the fact that we usually see him doing all sorts of work around the island. Going back to the drawing, I've decided to give Percy a slightly dopey smile, as if to say he's not quite sure what's going on. Drawing these pictures was somewhat therapeutic, for lack of a better term, since I wasn't necessarily trying to ape the style of a different artist and could just kind of do whatever in terms of art style and colour choice. The technicians that Percy is meant to be taking care of seem to be running away from him in terror. I don't know what the big deal is. You'd think they'd never seen an engine riding a motorcycle in a botanical garden before. And so, here is the finished drawing. And finally, here's James. Here's a quick read of his character bio. James is a medium-sized engine. His 6 driving wheels are not as big as Gordon's and not as small as Thomas's. He has a fine scarlet coat and brass dome and likes to think of himself as a really splendid engine. This can occasionally lead to highfalutin ideas about the sort of work suitable for such a noble creature. Invariably, they land James in trouble. And after being put through the translation ringer, this becomes: James is an ordinary engineer. His 6 guns are neither as big as Robbie Gordon nor Robbie Thomas. He wears a luxurious red suit and brass hat and considers himself a successful engineer, which often makes him into trouble, as he often asks what kind of job is appropriate for gentlemen. So the first question you may be asking is the same question I was asking when I first translated the bio. Who are Robbie Gordon and Robbie Thomas? After a bit of searching, I came across some people who fit the bill, albeit with slightly different spellings. Robbie Gordon is a race car driver who has participated in NASCAR, the IndyCar Series and the Dakar Rally, among others. On the other hand, we have Rob Thomas, the lead singer of the alternative rock band Matchbox 20. There we are, it's another Matchbox video. So there we are. I'm drawing some real people. I've had some experience with drawing caricatures of other people as well as myself, although my confidence regarding the matter is a bit mixed. If I'm drawing somebody I know in real life, then in the back of my head I'm always worrying that I might end up insulting them with my drawing. And if I'm drawing a caricature of a famous person, then I'm always slightly worried that people won't be able to tell who they are. A few years ago I did a drawing of Pierce Brosnan as part of an art challenge, and I think I did an okay job. I think the biggest obstacle on that front was simply that Brosnan doesn't exactly have the most caricaturable appearance. I think the challenge with this particular drawing is that whilst the two Robbies have fairly distinctive appearances, I'd never even heard of these people before starting work on the video. I did panic a bit when I saw that the bio mentioned James having 6 guns. How am I supposed to draw a human wielding 6 guns, let alone an engine? But then I remembered that a 6 gun is another name for a revolver. So I decided to draw James with 2 6 guns, one on either side of his running board. Neither of them are as big as the ones that the two Robbies are holding. Like I said before, I'm not necessarily trying to imitate the style of any pre-existing Railway Series or Thomas & Friends artists for this video, and this is especially apparent here since I've gone for an overall more cartoonish style. This was partially because I wanted to experiment with art styles, but also because I figured that it might be more practical to draw the human characters with bold line work. James has a brass hat, which was mentioned in the translated bio. I could have given him a hard hat like Thomas, but I went with something more akin to a cowboy hat. In keeping with the cowboy theme, I've also decided to set this drawing in a desert-like environment, with orange rock formations and cacti in the background. With that said and done, here is the finished illustration. And there you have it. Thomas, Percy and James according to their character bios after having been translated into a bunch of different languages. I've had a lot of fun with these, and coming up with ideas for these drawings was certainly a good laugh. What did you think? Did you want to see more badly translated Thomas characters? Or would you prefer something a bit more down to earth? Either way, be sure to leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.